I used to believe life had handed me the perfect story. Every morning, I woke up in our downtown Chicago apartment to Claire's golden hair splayed across the pillow, the sunlight spilling over her face like it belonged there. She'd stretch lazily, muttering some half-asleep joke that made me smile even before fully opening my eyes. Our mornings were seamless, almost ritualistic. I brewed coffee while she scrolled through news headlines. Then we shared small talk about everything and nothing. Plans for the day, a funny story from a friend, or the way the city lights gleamed after last night's rain. Breakfast was never rushed, always slow and deliberate, as if we were the only people in the world who mattered in those moments. By 8:30, I was heading to my marketing job downtown, and she to her tech startup. The rhythm of our lives felt unshakable. Weekdays passed with subtle intimacy. Weekends were for running along Lake Michigan, cooking elaborate meals together, and discovering hidden jazz bars that became ours. Friends frequently called us relationship goals, and family often remarked on our compatibility. I took pride in that perception. It wasn't just for show. I genuinely believed we were perfect for each other. I believed in us completely. There were small inconsistencies, tiny sparks of doubt I often dismissed. A phone call answered quietly in another room, a sudden change in plans, or a friend she seemed to prioritize over me without explanation. I rationalized every single instance. Stress, she was tired. Her work demanded flexibility. It never occurred to me to dig deeper, because accepting the possibility of dishonesty felt too dangerous. I clung to the narrative of perfection like a lifeline. I remember one evening vividly. We were at a small rooftop party with mutual friends, overlooking the skyline, glasses of wine in hand. Claire held my hand as we watched the sun dip below the cityscape, laughing at a joke I'd told. In that moment, I felt untouchable, like nothing in the world could threaten us. And yet, a tiny pang of unease brushed against the edges of my mind. A glance at her phone across the table revealed a message from someone unfamiliar. I caught myself noticing it, then dismissed it immediately, forcing my attention back to her eyes, her smile. I wanted to see only what I wanted to see. Our shared life reinforced the illusion. Even the mundane moments felt carefully orchestrated. Laundry folded in matching piles, groceries stocked exactly the way we liked, a mutual understanding of when to give space and when to embrace. Intimacy wasn't just physical. It was embedded in routine, in small gestures that quietly screamed compatibility. I felt proud, secure, and content. But beneath that perfection, subtle fissures had already begun to form. Minor inconsistencies, once brushed aside, were quietly accumulating like cracks in glass. I didn't see it yet, but the foundation of what I thought was unshakable trust was slowly eroding. And soon, the very life I considered flawless would reveal itself as a carefully constructed illusion, leaving me unprepared for the storm to come. At first, the signs were subtle, almost innocuous. Late-night phone calls that she answered in another room, sometimes laughing quietly, far too softly to be casual. Occasional text messages that made her smile differently than she smiled at me. Small changes in behavior, seemingly insignificant, but each one adding a flicker of unease. I noticed her canceling plans with friends at the last minute, claiming exhaustion or sudden deadlines at work that didn't quite align with her calendar. Each time, I rationalized it. She had a demanding job, she was tired, it was nothing personal. I wanted to believe in the perfection we had, so I ignored the nagging instinct that something was off. Yet, the discomfort persisted, growing like a low hum in the back of my mind. I couldn't quite shake it. I began paying closer attention, carefully documenting patterns. Gym nights that didn't match her schedule, sudden weekend outings to places she hadn't mentioned, friends I had never met who appeared in photos she posted online. Each inconsistency became a clue, though I still hesitated to act. Acting without certainty would make me appear paranoid. I needed evidence, clarity. I couldn't let emotion dictate my response. One evening, she left her laptop on the kitchen counter while stepping out for a brief errand. My eyes caught the brief flash of a Slack notification from someone with the initials J. The message tone was casual, playful, flirtatious even. My heart raced, not with anger, but with a cold, strategic alarm. I closed the laptop and left it alone, but the seed of certainty was planted. I couldn't ignore this. It was time to move beyond passive observation. I needed to gather proof to understand the full scope of what was happening. I began subtle surveillance, the kind that didn't alert her to my growing suspicion. I noted her comings and goings, compared them to her stated schedule, monitored patterns in her social media posts, and cross-referenced the friends she claimed to meet with public information. Each piece of information fit into a larger puzzle, and as the puzzle formed, my unease crystallized into a chilling realization. The cracks in our relationship were deeper than I had imagined. The red flags I had once dismissed as trivial now loomed like warning lights. I remembered the quiet laugh over her phone, the canceled dinner plans, the mysterious errands. What had once seemed like quirks or work stress now formed a mosaic of deception. My love for her remained, but it was tempered by awareness and the need for control. I could no longer afford blind trust. I needed clarity. Over the following weeks, my observation became more methodical. I created a mental map of her movements, her communications, the subtle signs she left behind. Every detail mattered: the timing of messages, the frequency of her absences, even the way she glanced at her phone when she thought I wasn't watching. It was no longer paranoia, it was preparation. Preparation for a truth I knew would hurt, but a truth I needed to confront head-on to reclaim control of my life. By the time I went to bed each night, my thoughts were a mixture of anticipation, fear, and determination. I was planning my next moves, strategizing, and waiting for the day when the reality of her actions would finally come into full view. I had crossed the line from passive trust to active vigilance, and there was no turning back. The breaking point arrived on a gray, rainy Thursday. The city streets glistened under the drizzle, but I hardly noticed. I had left my laptop on the kitchen counter while Claire went out, supposedly to meet a friend. A Slack notification appeared on my phone, her work account lighting up with messages from someone labeled only as J. The tone was casual, almost teasing, the kind of intimacy that should never exist outside a relationship. My stomach twisted, but instead of panic, I felt a cold clarity settle over me. I knew what I needed to do. That night, I waited. I pretended to sleep while listening to the soft click of the door, the patter of rain against the window, the sound of her keys jingling. When she returned, drenched and laughing as if nothing had shifted in our lives, I remained motionless, my mind racing with strategy. I couldn't confront her yet, not without certainty, not without proof. I had to be precise. Emotional confrontation without preparation would only give her leverage. Later, alone in the apartment, I discovered the laptop she had carelessly left unlocked. Emails, messages, photos, all revealing months of infidelity. Each click, each line of text was a blow, a confirmation of the suspicions I had carefully tracked. She had maintained an entire alternate life, one where our relationship existed in theory while she pursued someone else in practice. I cataloged everything meticulously: screenshots, timestamps, locations. My pulse raced, but my hands remained steady. This was not a moment for rash action. This was a moment to gather clarity, to prepare for confrontation on my terms. I remember sitting on the kitchen floor, the soft hum of the refrigerator around me, the rain still falling outside. My mind replayed every seemingly trivial red flag: the late-night calls, the sudden cancellations, the subtle flirtations. Every instinct I had ignored now screamed in retrospect. Yet amidst the shock and the betrayal, a strange sense of empowerment emerged. I had evidence, I had clarity, and most importantly, I had control. I began formulating my next moves with careful precision. I would confront her, not in anger, but with undeniable proof. I would reclaim my space, my finances, my life. There would be no dramatics, no screaming, just strategy and execution. I envisioned the steps I would take: changing locks, freezing shared accounts, documenting everything, and contacting trusted friends to witness the process. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange combination of pain and exhilaration. Pain for the deception, the betrayal, the loss of trust. Exhilaration for the clarity, the strategic advantage, the knowledge that I was no longer powerless. Claire had underestimated me, assumed my love blinded me to reality. But love alone does not govern action. I had instincts, patience, and a plan. and with those tools, I would navigate the storm she had created. By the end of that night, I was resolved. I would not be a victim. I would not be manipulated. The truth had been revealed, but now it was my move, and I intended to play it perfectly. I waited until Friday evening. Precision was key. The apartment was calm, almost eerily so, with soft lighting from the candles and the faint hum of the city below. Dinner was arranged for two, her favorite dishes, her preferred wine, everything set meticulously. I wanted the environment to reflect control, not chaos. This was my moment, and I intended to execute it with calculated clarity. When Claire returned, radiant as ever, drenched from the evening rain, she stepped into the apartment with a cheerful smile. I met her gaze with unwavering calm, and without a word slid the folder of evidence across the table. Silence fell immediately, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the faint clink of cutlery against the plates I had prepared. Her initial reaction was subtle confusion, quickly morphing into panic. She leaned forward, eyes wide, lips trembling. What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, yet laced with the tremor of fear. I remained silent, letting her absorb the gravity of the proof before I spoke. The folder contained everything: messages, timestamps, screenshots, photos, an unassailable chronicle of her deception. Then came the manipulation, the familiar tactic she must have perfected over months. "Maybe we just need a break," she suggested, her tone almost pleading, eyes darting in search of my reaction. "Some space, a little time, we can figure this out." I shook my head slowly, meeting her gaze with unflinching resolve. "No, Claire, I'm done. You made your choice. Now you deal with it," I said evenly, each word deliberate, weighted with authority. In the days that followed, I moved methodically. I changed the locks, froze joint accounts, and documented our shared finances to ensure that I maintained control. Every step was deliberate, leaving no room for chaos, no room for her manipulation. I reached out to trusted friends, not for sympathy, but as witnesses to my actions, ensuring transparency and accountability in reclaiming my autonomy. Clara attempted to counter, posting public apologies, trying to explain her behavior, attempting to manipulate social perception, but the truth was evident. Professionally, she suffered consequences. Colleagues questioned her integrity, clients grew hesitant, and her reputation took tangible hits. Socially, friends distanced themselves, unwilling to reconcile with someone whose duplicity had become public knowledge. Her world, once meticulously curated, was collapsing. Meanwhile, I focused on the forward momentum. Every morning began with clarity and purpose. Runs along Lake Michigan, mental planning for my career, personal goals and hobbies. Each step reinforced my regained control. I refused to let anger dictate my actions. Strategy and discipline became my tools. I realized then that power isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming autonomy, regaining stability, and refusing to be defined by someone else's betrayal. By the end of that week, the apartment felt lighter, almost new. I had reasserted authority over my environment, my life, my narrative. Claire's attempts to manipulate, to regain control were futile. The playing field had shifted entirely, and I was firmly in command. For the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt not just relief, but a profound sense of empowerment. I had turned a moment of violation into an opportunity to reclaim agency, and the clarity it brought was intoxicating. The first few weeks after reclaiming control felt surreal. The apartment, once heavy with tension, now felt like a sanctuary. I threw myself into routines that were entirely my own. Early morning runs along the Lake Michigan shoreline, the crisp wind cutting through the remnants of lingering anxiety. Each breath reminding me I was alive and capable. The rhythm of my steps became meditative, a silent affirmation of the autonomy I had regained. I enrolled in an advanced project management course at Northwestern, something I had postponed for years due to work and relationship obligations. The intellectual challenge reinvigorated me, each lecture and assignment sharpening my focus. I began networking with colleagues and classmates, forming connections based on shared goals and mutual respect rather than superficial social niceties. For the first time in months, I felt that my personal and professional life were aligned, deliberate, and purposeful. Outside of work, I pursued long-delayed passions. I joined a youth basketball team as a coach, mentoring teenagers and instilling discipline, teamwork, and confidence. Seeing their growth mirrored my own, a transformation from uncertainty to strength. Music became my refuge. Jazz, blues, and classical compositions filled my apartment, the melodies replacing the echoes of betrayal with inspiration and energy. Weekends were no longer dictated by obligations or shared routines. They were mine to fill with exploration, travel, and discovery. Socially, I found new friends who valued honesty, integrity, and directness. Dinner parties, casual hangouts, and spontaneous adventures became opportunities to rebuild a network grounded in trust and shared values. I was selective, discerning, ensuring that the people I let close had the same principles I now held dear. In doing so, I surrounded myself with support that was both authentic and enriching. Most importantly, I internalized a vital lesson. Love without respect, clarity, and mutual integrity is dangerous. I had experienced deception at its most intimate level, but instead of letting it define me, I had used it as a catalyst for growth. My self-respect had become non-negotiable. Compromise at the cost of dignity was no longer an option. The control I had reclaimed wasn't just over my environment, it was over my choices, my emotions, and the trajectory of my life. Standing on the balcony one evening, overlooking the city lights of Chicago reflecting on Lake Michigan, I felt a profound sense of liberation. Claire's shadow lingered only as a cautionary lesson, a reminder of what I would no longer tolerate. Life had not just resumed, it had evolved into something richer, more deliberate, and entirely mine. The betrayal had been devastating, but the transformation it triggered was exhilarating. I had turned pain into power, loss into self-discovery, and deception into clarity. For the first time, I realized that control, clarity, and self-respect were more satisfying than love built on compromise or pretense. My life was no longer defined by someone else's choices or lies. It was defined by mine. Freedom, integrity, and purpose became my companions, and with them, I stepped confidently into the next chapter, stronger, wiser, and fully alive.